This is kind of a hard day to stand up and speak, um, or sit and speak. Yeah, Yom HaZikaron is I guess it's tough in a way. We look around, we have a state, we have a place that we can go visit. Maybe it's not so easy to always hop on a plane and ship it over there. No direct flights, but there's a place you have access to. Everything up until Har HaBayis. If you want to go there too, you can. Um, and in a way, maybe it's a little tough to think about what to say. How do you commemorate? How do you think about what that is? My father's always said this, but also the transition from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaAtzmaut. You have this day of reflection, and then all of a sudden you go to a foam party, and like it's kind of a big switcheroo. My dad has never been to a foam party, for the record. And if you're listening, Abba, I never. Um, but yeah, it's a bit tough to know what to say and how to really reflect on those 2 days. So I guess for me it was kind of a blessing when the Parsha did it for me. Achrei Mot and then Kedoshim, Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut. It kind of, in a way, was a direct handoff of what's happening. The Parshiot are generally, I think maybe they're always a partnered Parsha. They always go together as Zugim. Not always? Okay, good. Thank you for the correction. But they work well together, and I think that if we think about what's in the parsha, there's a lot we can learn about how to commemorate, how to move forward from the days that we're in today. So first things first, it's the parsha starts off Achrei Mot-Kedoshim, and then it goes immediately into Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, if we think about this, one of the big wars in the history of the state also. If we look at the number of deaths that came out of there, it's roughly 10% of this 25,000 that have perished in the maintenance of the independence of the state of Israel. So not a simple thing. It was a day perhaps where we think of ourselves as being safe, spiritual, connected with God, and yet we were attacked and vulnerable on that day. And when you look at this, it brings down something actually we talked about last week, the Seir LaAzazel and the Seir LaHashem. It brings down this separation. And maybe one of the challenges that it gives us is how to think about how we integrate these two different things. The Seir LaAzazel and Hashem were supposed to be very similar kind of goats in appearance. They looked the same. They were considered a pair. If you lost one, you had to go and get a new pair to make sure that they were matched. And the way that we decided which one was to Hashem and which one goes to Azazel was through a lottery. And maybe in a way, what we're sort of being guided to here is there's stuff that happens in life that's challenging, and there's stuff that happens in life that is inherently good. Sometimes it's not so easy to tell the difference between which one really is which one. We see people who overcome great challenge and they use it as a form of growth, and other people it breaks them. It's kind of challenging to look at. I'm always inspired when I hear these stories of people who they lost someone in the war, and you see what they've come out with and how they recover, and it almost feels a little bit like a go roll, like a lottery in a way. But I think the flip side of this is what comes next in the parsha. The two things that come right after that are, one, a guide about where we're supposed to do sacrifice. We have to do sacrifice only in the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash at the times, and that we have to be very respectful of blood. We don't drink blood. And in a way, what I think this is giving us is the guidance that yes, we have both occurrences that we sacrifice both goats. We sacrifice the goat to Hashem. We sacrifice the goat to Azazel. But one of them we do in the right way. We integrate that into our lives in a positive way. We do it in the right place. And the other one, we let go. We let it go into the wilderness, and we don't hold it with us anymore. And when the Torah describes the idea of blood, it describes it as something that is the creation of nefesh. It's very connected to this. And in a way, maybe what it is the blood is the integration. It's the what we use to bring stuff if you think about it, what is good blood? It's oxygenated. We take what's out, we bring it in, and we use it to help ourselves go around in the world and in a positive way. So maybe the challenge here is that, as we think about recovery from zikaron and from death and achrei mot and all of those kinds of things, we're trying to figure out the right balance of what are the things that we need to integrate into ourselves and what do we need to let go and what's the right way and place to do that. Some of those things we internalize and some of them we let go of. And it describes here also this idea of consuming blood as the language, I can't remember exactly what it is in the Parsha, is like murder. Rotzeach, I can't remember exactly how it says it in the Parsha, but we'll see a little bit more later about how that maybe is relevant in today's Parsha. But at the end of all of this, we end the Parsha and we move into Kedoshim. And Kedoshim is about this sort of idea of Kedoshim to you, this holiness that we have to live up to. The Parsha brings down a whole bunch of ideas around how we interact with others. Leket, and being careful about people that are around us, and probably one of the most impactful phrases in all of this is the idea of Ahavta l'recha kamocha. And we know, Rabbi Akiva, we're going through the Sphira right now. This was his midah of being kind to one another. This is potentially why we have all these afflictions that we do during Sphira. No hair cutting, no music, whether you celebrate tomorrow and do any of those things, etc. But it's a central tenet. We have the story of Hillel. This person comes over, he stands on one foot. What's the only thing Hillel says you have to know? This is what you have to know. This is the one thing. So maybe this is the guidance for us about how we move on from death also, from having independence is with love, is with some practice like this. But love on its own is not, it can be sort of simplified, but there's a number of different ways to understand this idea of Ahavta l'recha kamocha. Some people say that the way to understand it is that you should love another person like you love yourself. And obviously we're all self-centered, so be other-centered too, considerate of other people. There's the opposite way of viewing this is to say, well, the way you love somebody else, you would never be so rude and hurtful to them, so you have to be kind to yourself too. Very often you hear the internal voice that you use with yourself is not so kind. It's, conniving and you should be better. We rebuke ourselves in far more challenging ways than we're comfortable doing for other people. So we see that this idea of Ahavta l'recha kamocha goes both ways. And I think that perhaps one of the challenges also with all of this is to think about what it is to be reyacha. What does it mean to be like a good, loosely translated, a good friend for somebody? Yeah, it's nice to be, have the good times and hang out together. But the other side of this is also the requirement to rebuke somebody properly, to help them grow, to consider when it is a time not to relax and just say this is fine. Rabbi Sachs brings down a number of different examples of rebuking leaders, and when you're a follower, what's your responsibility? Groupthink becomes an undoing of nations. Yesterday I was talking with somebody from a psychological standpoint around the challenge of openness. There were many, many examples throughout history where people felt like they couldn't say something, and that led to disasters. Vietnam, hospitals, many different examples that sort of come to mind. But I think the flip side of this is that we tie it back with what we were talking about in the previous Parsha, is that there's sort of a time and a place. There's a right way to do rebuke. And maybe to connect it back, there's an idea, I think, brought down in Rashi around how to do this well. Ahavta l'recha kamocha is also lo samod al dam re'acha. And we see here this connection of blood, this idea that somebody is trying to do integration, somebody is trying to figure out what it is that is la Hashem and la Azazel, to do it in the right place in the right time. and that there is a right way to help support them in that and help give them guidance in that. And at the same time, it's sort of, on the edge. How do you do that properly? How do you consider? So we gave a couple of examples about being considerate for people. There's an idea here that also is brought down throughout both of these parshiot around Hagera Garbaseichem, the stranger who lives amongst you. And very often it's easy for us to say, well, okay, now we have our place, everyone else is out. This is the idea of boundaries. We put other people away, and this is me. But there's an idea of a ger gar betochem is the person who is kind of, we acknowledge as other. We know that they are not the same as us. We know that we have different identities. We understand that there are differences between us. We even draw boundaries between us. And yet we hold them to the same high standards. They're not allowed to have blood. They're not allowed to engage in certain activities amongst us, and so on and so forth. And we have to be kind to them. So a lot of the interpersonal laws that we talked about in Kedoshim are also, they apply also to the ger. So there's this sort of catch-22 of prisha for kedusha and drawing boundaries, and at the same time including. I don't really have an answer for how exactly we do all of these kinds of things, but maybe there's, we'll explore one more thing and then try and bring it home. But interesting that at the end of both of these parshiot, we talk about the forbidden acts, sexual acts that we cannot have, and the list primarily goes through people who are very close to you. So it's, in a way, the Parsha is showing you where the ger is one end of the excluded group, the family is the other end of the included group, and there are boundaries and activities that we have to do. Be careful with both of those edges, both of the outliers in our lives. And what's interesting about it is that maybe in Achrei we set the boundaries. We say, this is what you can't do, this is where the edge of behavior is. And then the repetition in Kedoshim gives us the consequences. It gives us all this is what happens when you do this. If you do this act, this is the punishment. And I think maybe what it's doing is giving us the responsibility of understanding boundaries, both in a literal context of having a state and what that means, and having some people that are accepted in the nations that live amongst us, and what are the standards we have to live up to with them, and what it means to maintain a border and have a boundary of somebody that's outside of that border, a standard of living and of practice that's maybe challenging to maintain. I don't know if this gives us really a clear guidance on how to think about either any of this kind of prisha or Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut, but in a way, I think that there's a lot of themes in the two parshiot that bring this together. And maybe one last thing to add, yesterday was the yortzeit of Rav Shaila Karastir. Some of you maybe know him, maybe you've heard of him. He was the famous rabbi. There's one picture of him that people put up in different places. He's attributed to a lot of kinds of folklore. And I first found out about a year ago because my sister had there was a situation in their place in their car in Israel, and my brother-in-law got her a little sticker to put in the car, and I started to call Rav Shaila the parking rabbi, because wherever we would go, we would find a quick parking spot. That was the segula that the Rav Shaila that gave, and there's a lot of folklore that's attributed to him. He's attributed to some people say if you have a mice problem, you bring in Rav Shaila as a picture, but one of the things that they really attributed to him is that he was known for the midah of achnasas orchim. And I think yesterday I saw a picture from the caver, where people go and visit him, and there was somebody who had jumped into the area where all people put their peteks and their requests. And the comment section, we don't read anything anymore without reading the comment section, also was going up. how could he do this? No kavod. And then the other side was saying, how considerate we have to. What would it take for somebody to need to jump into this place? And I think maybe both of them are right at the same time, and that's the challenge for us at this time, is to think about what could possibly a person be going through to feel the urge to do that. And at the same time, there are standards that we kind of live up to. And I don't know if there's a clear answer for what is Hashem and Azazel and all of these kinds of things, but the challenge for us is to figure out what to integrate and what to be respectful of. And yeah, no really closing remarks, but Hazoi. This is kind of